This is the Texas Land Guys podcast, hosted by brothers Tim Dosch and Tom Dosch. With their partners David Marshall and Tripp Rich, they have built DMRE, the leading land brokerage in Texas. With decades of experience brokering deals between landowners and real estate developers, they take you inside the deals that move the market.
Well, Tim, I'm excited. So we're finally sitting down and recording our first episode. I'm not sure if this episode will release first or not, but we've made it a goal that we wanted to start recording before the end of the year, and we're making it happen. We're working through some challenges. What have some of the highlights of your morning been? I think it's almost 10 o'clock. We set the calendar to start recording at 8, so it's obviously taken some time.
Well, so for the audience to know, Tom has Brad, who's one of our top DMRE folks up in Dallas, who's really gone above and beyond to set the studio up and everything from sewing curtains together to installing this kind of foam backdrop you see behind Tom that looks like wood. It's really cool. And there's probably maybe 100 wires and a ton of equipment that's all surrounding us, lights and cameras and all kinds of stuff. So I've been by myself in Houston with the help of Sawyer, one of our analysts, who's actually started helping me. But I came in this morning and walked in needing to do a lot. So it's taken us about 2 hours to get to this point to kind of get started. But I'm excited to get started. It's been about 5 months in the making. Talking about this is kind of an idea, something we want to do. We've actually wanted to do it for years. And getting to the point of finally starting is pretty exciting.
Yeah, this has been a passion project of ours for a long time. I think I bought the microphones that I'm using today, which we've had some technical difficulties, so I'm going to have new mics here in the future. But I bought these back in 2020 during COVID when you and I were listening to a lot of podcasts that were helping us as we were growing DMRE and even just different things we're interested in, different topics. And we thought, we should start a podcast for what we do every day with DMRE. It's so interesting. There's a lot we could share. We could do a lot of neat interviews, but it's a lot of work to put this together. I think it's pretty intimidating. And I think we've always wanted, if we were gonna go record content, we want it to be valuable content, that there would be really a reason for it to be out there. And obviously it's a big commitment for us just from a time standpoint. So the two of us committing to record these podcasts to try to add value to our audience. And then we'll have, Tripp and David and others at DMRE joining us. We'll have other experts in the industry joining us as well. But should be a fun adventure. And I know we still have some work to do. We're getting your new backdrop, like you said, that'll be in soon. But it's exciting to actually just finally hit record and start working on some content that we can share.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the things we want to do with this is really be able to talk directly to our audience, which is going to be a mixture of people that are sellers that maybe aren't really in the business, but they have some land that they want to sell, or a building where the land's really valuable. There's going to be developers who are friends of ours who've done a lot of deals with, and maybe new developers in Texas who are going to listen. I'm sure a lot of brokers will listen, just a lot of different folks in the business, title people, surveyors, appraisers. And so trying to speak directly to people the way we would in our office. We have people every day coming into our office and sitting with us, and we talk about the market. We talk about what their goals are in this business, whether they're trying to buy land or they're trying to sell land, or there's some relationship that they have with us. We're helping them be successful, and being able to talk at a broader level to a broader audience and try and give them that same value that we give our clients.
Yeah, I think we're excited to be able to talk about an industry that maybe a lot of people don't really think about in land brokerage and land investment and land development. And I think when we were deciding that this is something we were going to commit to starting up this podcast, we were looking for other similar podcasts, because again, we didn't want to go just do another podcast that maybe already existed. And I think we both had a hard time really finding something very similar to what we're excited to deliver, which is going to be really getting into what we do every day in the business, running a real estate company, and being so involved still on the deal side. Both of us working in two of the largest markets, you, Tim, in Houston, me in Dallas, in the country, where there's an incredible amount of land that's trading hands and a lot of development happening. I think it's a neat opportunity to speak from the perspective of two guys that have been a part of large brokerage firms, started our own firm with our partners, and have learned a lot, and get to be a part of some of the coolest, largest, neatest projects that are happening in our respective markets.
No, that's right. I think the idea of people that are actually in the business, doing the deals, working with people that are the influencers, actually involved in the business versus a lot of what seems to be out there are people that aren't really in the business, but they're talking about investing in the business, or they're on the periphery of our business. There doesn't seem to be a lot of people that are actually day in and day out in the grind, doing the deals the way that we are and the way that our clients are. And so I think that there's a lot of value in that. And I think that probably the reason that people don't do that who are really in the business is, for one thing, it's really hard to get started. I mean, we've seen how hard this is, just getting the technology, giving the time to it. There's a lot of work that it takes, and we're already very busy, in our job, doing the deals. And so it is a little bit of a sacrifice, but I think it's going to be a great value to the folks that listen.
And I know we were talking a lot about how could we boil down what value we're trying to deliver to our audience. And I thought that you had just a great summary of really what we're hoping that we can help our audience do. And you've already talked about our audience is going to be pretty diverse, but share what you were saying earlier, just about really just helping people in any different angle they're approaching their land.
Yeah, I think, whatever your viewpoint is, if you're a seller, we see sellers all the time make a lot of mistakes in how they market their land or how they think about the value of their land, how to maximize the value of their land. And we help sellers maximize the value of their land. We've done that a lot, helping sellers set records with some of the sales that we've had. In the same way, on the buy side, there's developers who are looking for sites. Some of them are very good at it. Some of them aren't. Some of them waste a lot of time and money tying up sites that don't work. And we've made a huge business helping buyers find sites that will work, that all the due diligence items check out. On the front end, they're pursuing an opportunity that has a higher likelihood of closing and being a good development site for them. And then also there's going to be a lot of brokers, I think, that listen and just talking about, what does it mean to be a good broker? How do you represent your clients well? And maybe what are some of the ways that we see, brokers who don't help their clients and they actually hurt the outcome for their clients. So across the board, whatever someone's relationship is with this business, trying to help them have the information they need to have a great outcome with whatever their pursuit is in our business.
Yeah, I love that idea of what you said about optimizing their outcome, because there's going to be some people where it's pretty straightforward. It's, selling their property for as much as they can, which, like you said, we've done that many times. But in other cases, it's, it's a situation where maybe they're more concerned with what their property is going to become, or maybe just how quickly they can cash out their property, or maybe they want to, roll their property into a project as an investment. And so there's a lot of different motivations, but just, our experience, what we get to do every day is so interesting, and being able to talk through and just really just share with a broad audience, hopefully ways that they can think about their land holdings, family members' land holdings, or even, like you said, if it's a developer and they're thinking about land they're looking to buy, what should they be thinking about? What are different ways to optimize it? So I love that idea. I hope that that's something we can deliver. And I think that today I thought it would be good for us to maybe get a little bit into some of what makes our view of what we do a little bit more unique in the business. And so I thought we could maybe start by defining some terms. And then also after that, kind of talking about what this podcast will look like, as far as if you are tuning in. Not every episode is going to be the same. There's going to be a lot of different interesting elements of the business we'll cover. But first, talking about terms, I think land itself is probably a good place to start. So, Tim, when you think of land, what do you think the average person what's coming to their mind when you think of land as a business, and then the way that we look at land?
Yeah, we talked about this before, but I think that people think probably rural land, farmland, ranch land, just a big expanse of land with some fences around it. I think it's how people probably think of it. That's how I thought about it before I got in the business. The way we're speaking of land and where we think the real opportunity is land that can be put into development, where you can maximize the value of that land. And it could be some land that's ranch land or farmland today. We've done a lot of those deals that are now neighborhoods, or there's, a grocery anchor retail center on that land, or, different things are on that land. As we see these large MSAs expand further and further out, the land they're expanding on is rural land. It's becoming, suburban land. But also we talked about urban land, high-rise sites that are in the city, sites that are going to be high-rise office or high-rise multifamily, or, industrial land, just all these different kinds of uses that you see when you talk about the land development business. And so that's what we're looking at, is what can be activated for development.
Yeah, I think that's such a good distinction because I've had a lot of conversations over the years, and the same question has come up a lot. So, you really think there's enough land to make that a business? And I think we laugh about that because you go to any place in the U.S., even New York, they're still tearing down buildings and building new buildings, and so we're thinking about it as, is the future development value just worth more than what's there today? And Tim, you're in Houston. I started my career down in Houston, and I remember getting into the business, and what I loved about Houston was no zoning. And the
Yeah.
fact that we would drive around town, we would go, to the most developed parts of Houston, inside the Loop and downtown and all these areas. And really, every property was a potential if it was a lower coverage property. And so there were a lot of properties that they had existing businesses on them, sometimes multi-story, 5 stories or above. And, we would call on those properties, and those would become land opportunities because the buildings would ultimately get knocked down and the high rise would get built in their place. And so I think that's a really important distinction because, most people, like you said, are thinking about rural land. And when they're thinking about land, a lot of times it's more from an investment standpoint, and they're just thinking about purchasing rural land and waiting for it to appreciate. And I
Yeah,
think
I
we
mean,
look at
when we talk about land, we're thinking of, office buildings, in a downtown area, apartment deals, old retail deals. We've torn down, probably thousands of units of old apartments, a lot of office buildings over the years, retail, different, definitely a lot of industrial, probably millions of square feet of industrial that we've torn down. You just have these developments or these buildings that are very old, they're obsolete. The value of the land now is much more than the value of the building, and so they're prime for someone to come in and tear them down and redevelop them. And like you said, in Houston, it's pretty easy to do that. In places like Dallas and Austin, there's more challenges with zoning and entitlements you have to work out.
Well, and I think that what we've seen in our careers, there's been different cycles and different trends in the market is, there's been times when urban land has been in higher demand, and there's been times when suburban land has been in higher demand. And the same goes for different asset types. Like there's been a huge run on apartments for a long time. Previously that was more office was, in high demand, and there's not so much, office being developed anymore. So it really is, it makes it interesting. And we'll talk about that a lot on the podcast. It's just different trends and how they shape what we're doing day to day.
Yeah, and to add to trends, cycles, I mean, I feel like Dallas has been on this just straight upward trajectory since the Great Recession. Houston has had a lot of big cycles with, the oil markets, and COVID hit us pretty hard. Different things that really affect the market and change pricing, change developer interest in sites, and so we're constant. The market moves every single day, but it's definitely moving year to year. And a lot of times, I think people think of land as almost like a stock or something where they can just sell it real quick and they know what it's worth. And we see that land is, a lot of times there's kind of a broad range of what land could be worth, and there's so many factors that affect the value, and those factors are always changing. And so, like you said, it's a lot more complicated and involved than probably the average person thinks.
Well, and we're calling this podcast the Texas Land Guys podcast, and that's for the reason of we've started, DMRE, Dosch Marshall Real Estate. We have offices in the largest metros in Texas, and so one of the things we'll talk a lot about is the Texas Triangle, and the Texas Triangle really is, it's Houston, the Houston MSA, which is fourth largest in the country, fourth largest city. You have DFW, which is an enormous MSA, and then you have Austin, San Antonio. Really makes up this triangle that is top 10 highest GDP in the world, larger than a lot of very significant countries. And just the population growth expectations, the amount of companies that are moving to these areas, the jobs, it makes for, it's really a fast-paced market that we get to work in. And there's so much land still, even that's just undeveloped land. And then also a lot of these urban areas are still pretty low dense when you really look at them, especially compared to areas like New York or Boston that have been developed for a lot longer.
Yeah, it's funny. This is a little bit off topic, but just thinking about how there's always more land. I was in Manhattan with my family a few months ago, and I was actually seeing opportunities. I mean, even in Manhattan, which is probably the largest number of high rises anywhere in the country, it's a very dense market. There's still opportunities there. There's still buildings are obsolete. They're still tearing buildings down. There's still new development. When you think about Texas, the main opportunities in the population centers. And I think what you're alluding to is there's a lot of predictions that Texas could have the 3 largest cities in the country. in the next, 60 to 80 years or so, with the kind of growth that we're seeing and the continued growth that we will see. So we like to talk about the Texas Triangle, which is just, Houston, DFW, and Austin and San Antonio. If you just kind of drew a line between all those cities, and that's where all the growth is, population growth and job growth, where the companies are moving. And I think it's just going to continue to happen over the next decades. And that's kind of the main focus of this podcast, is talking about land in those areas. We've done land down the valley. We've done land in West Texas. I think the Texas Triangle is where the real activity is.
Yeah, and when we're talking about land brokerage, and we'll get into this in future episodes, we'll talk about our, why we got into the business, why you specifically got in, because you were the first one of all the partners that got into land brokerage, and then recruited the rest of us to join you. But when you think about land brokerage, I think that the way we've always approached it has been a little bit different. So why don't you want to cover that? And I can speak to it too, but do you want to start by kind of covering just how we've approached land brokerage in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of directions we can go with that. I think that the first thing that comes to mind is we've always really focused on the buyer rep side of the business. And so what we mean by that is helping developer clients find the best sites. And that is really driven us to look at every single site in the submarket, to look at the off-market sites, to try and talk to every owner, to understand all the factors that affect value. So floodplain, entitlement issues, all the utility issues that can be a problem on a site, environmental issues, all those different things, understand the submarket, looking at the rents in that submarket. And when we've been able to be successful for those clients, that's actually set us up very well to be successful on the listing side, because we can go to a seller and say, we know who the most active developers are. We know the guys who are going to drop sites who aren't very real, but go tie up a lot of sites. And we know the guys who actually will close. And then we really understand value in each submarket, because we've seen all the sites that are out there that a lot of the brokerage community doesn't see, and the sellers definitely aren't seeing. And we know where those sites are priced, and then the nuances of why they're priced that way. Maybe there's a utility problem on that site, that's why it traded lower. Maybe there's a floodplain issue or environmental issue. And so that's actually why we've been able to sell some sites at some really high numbers, because we've actually seen a dislocation in value where the market is going up quickly and no one else really saw it. And we said, hey, if we go take this site out, like I'm thinking of one over on Memorial in Houston that we sold for Dispelling, which is a local nonprofit. And we sold the site for probably 30%, maybe 40% above what it had ever been sold for in that market. And it was because we created a competitive bid process, and we knew that price could run up a lot more because of our buyer rep activity in that submarket. So that's kind of there's a lot of reasons, I think, why we've been successful and how we started, but that's, to me, one of the big ones.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting about starting with that as what makes us different is I think that that's really changed the way that we've grown our company and structured teams. When I joined the business with you and David, we had a small team, and so we were working together, the three of us. But then we realized, pretty quickly that if we wanted to grow and hire new brokers, we needed to work in a way that was different than the traditional model, because the traditional model really didn't encourage sharing of information. Because when you're split is just with the house, and when there's not a lot of motivation to help the person next to you, because that's going to get into what you would make on the deal. And in some cases, information can be stolen from one person to another. And then that can result in a deal basically be taken away in your own office. And so we realized pretty quickly we need to come up with a way where we can all win together. And we set up a structure of sharing of information where that is rewarded, because if we share information, which also has meant we share clients, and we put our clients' interests first, because if our client is being served by the group, they have access to all of the information, and they have access to all of the relationships within that group. From a landowner standpoint, it really means that all of our clients get the best service, and that's allowed us to have the greatest success. But it's been difficult because I think a lot of people get into the brokerage business, and it's really the main interest is just making as much money as they can, doing as few of deals as they can. And there's kind of a lie that you and I talk about a lot, that is, I can just, especially as a young person, I can just do 2-3 deals a year, keep all of it for myself, and have this, incredible living. And I think what we've seen is what we do is a lot of hard work, but doing it together is a huge competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Our teams have been a lot more successful as a team and individually than those that have kind of tried to go out and swim with the sharks by themselves. And of course, there's always going to be a person or two that can be really successful on their own, but it's a lie to think that really just by yourself we could accomplish even close to what we've been able to accomplish together. So that's meant that we've, like I said, we've formed teams, shared information, we've invested millions of dollars in technology because now we can leverage technology as a competitive advantage. Really can't do that if you're working in silos because then you don't have the sharing and really just the aggregate benefit of everyone working together. So I'd love to hear your take on that because you were the first one to really come together, recruit the rest of us, which is also a form of building teams and sharing. And you saw the value in that from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is having an environment that fosters collaboration instead of conflict. And most brokerage companies and places where I've worked before this, there was constant conflict and there was no sharing of information. You would tell the market you're a team, and that's very common. Everybody says, well, we're a team, we all work together. And normally that's not true. Like you said, the way that people are incentivized individually, it makes the most sense to hold everything in, hold all the information in, not to share clients. And we actually had a recent client meeting, and there were 5 of us sitting around the table with this, and it's a very large national developer that we were meeting with. And I was just thinking, they're getting a benefit of 5 people working together, all of our knowledge pooled together, all these sites and these conversations we're having in the business pulled together. Where if they were meeting with a typical broker, it's probably 1 broker, maybe it's 2 that've kind of partnered up, but there's just a limit to what that kind of structure can do for a client. And I think, like you've alluded to, we've just seen an incredible outsized impact we've been able to make as far as number of deals, the type of deals that we're doing, the service to our clients. I mean, our clients have been pushing us hard to go outside of Texas and introducing us to their counterparts in other states because of how much we're helping them in Texas. And that's something we've looked at hard. I think we're going to focus on Texas for right now, but I think it just speaks to how much the difference in our approach to the business and how much that helps these buyers versus a traditional structure that is not a team approach.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting because everybody would agree that in sports, the better team is always going to beat the better individuals. But for some reason, that doesn't always translate into how people think about business. But I think we all can see that in football or basketball. And we talk a lot about, we've spent so much time developing processes, investing in technology, working with the best clients in the market that now, we have, a high performing offense where, we can plug in just really, really, well-trained, strong individuals that we bring onto the team, and they can pretty quickly make a difference. And a lot of that is because of just, the incredible amount of effort that's gone into building this very robust, full, what I would say, compares to whatever the top offense is at the time in sports, where, if the quarterback gets hurt, you can plug in the backup and you really don't miss much of a beat because they've done such a good job with the plan, the playbook, and the rest of the players. They're all in sync.
That's right. And that's the goal. And it's a struggle with any organization, whether it's a football team or it's a real estate firm. And we've seen that as entrepreneurs, there's ways that you do things that work really well. And there's all kinds of problems that you run into. And you're always fixing problems and innovating and working through things. And so we've had to do that over the years. And our approach continues to change as the market changes and as opportunities change. But I think that's always the goal, is to have a really strong team so that we can help our clients maximize the outcome for them.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be hitting some of those topics on the podcast. I think we're excited to talk about, like you said, where we've, had big successes, mistakes we've made, things we've learned as we've, moved from one office to multiple offices across the state to, a small team, less than 10 people when we started, to, approaching 40 people and still growing. Other, interesting endeavors that we've started, we have a very entrepreneurial spirit. So we've started, a nonprofit, we've started a land investment company. So just a lot of other, interesting topics that we'll be looking forward to covering. And I think we mentioned this earlier, but initially when we were thinking through the podcast and thinking about, what we were looking for, we were having a hard time finding, people that were really involved in the deals on these podcasts. And so I think just the concept of deal makers, whether that's brokers or whether that's developers, you and I can speak to hundreds of deals that we've personally closed, thousands of deals that we've been involved in because of the way we work. Our company now has closed, over 700 land transactions. Average land transaction for us, is close to $10 million. So these are big land deals. And I think that the type of clients that we look forward to having on the call, just industry experts on these interviews will be really interesting for the audience just to learn more about the deals themselves, how developers see the world. I think brokers a lot of times have and there's kind of a negative connotation, but I think a lot of times people have a negative connotation of developers too. And I think we've found that, a lot of developers are just incredible people. There's definitely no negative stereotype that fits for developers. And so it'll be fun to be able to introduce our audience to just some great people along the way too.
Yeah, I think a big part of this podcast is dispelling misconceptions. And I think people like to kind of have this archetype of, brokers are bad or developers are bad, or, developers say that the landowners are bad because they've had a lot of bad experiences with landowners. And there are bad people. There's a lot of bad brokers. There's a lot of bad developers. There's a lot of bad landowners, but there's also people that are really good people. And so I think the more educated you are on the business and the best way to do this business, you can have really good experiences. Everybody can win. It doesn't have to be a lose-lose situation. And hearing the other side's viewpoint and why they think the way they do, I think is really valuable. And hopefully that's something we can do through this podcast.
Yeah, and so I think we covered a lot of those terms that we talked about, and I think in that we talked about some of the different topics we'll cover. And so, kind of summarizing that, I mean, I think this podcast we're gonna definitely cover trends in the market. What we're seeing in places like Austin and San Antonio, what we're seeing, maybe specifically industrial land pursuits in Houston, or build for rent land pursuits in Dallas, or maybe retail activity in Fort Worth. I mean, we'll be talking about some nuance at times and getting pretty specific, different metrics that are important to us that we follow and that we track in the business. Of course, in Texas, where there is no disclosure of land pricing, our ability to track comps across the market really just gives us a feel for what we're seeing in the market, what's closing. And also, like you said, just the number of offers we're making gives us really the best pulse on the market and where pricing is moving day to day in the market.
I think one thing to add that's interesting is I think what maybe to pat ourselves in the back, why we're a good person to listen to about these topics is we actually sit in every single chair. So we're a broker. We've had a long history of decades in the brokerage business. We've been involved in, nearly 1,000 deals now that have closed, but we're also a buyer. We've bought, what's valued about $150 million in land in Texas with some of our investors. And we're also a seller. We've sold a lot of these sites to developers. And so we have kind of sat in every chair. And I think there's a lot of value, even thinking back to being a broker working at another company and the way I thought of just being a deal guy, and how I thought about the house and, how I was upset about different things and didn't quite understand the whole picture. And then owning a company and being on the house side and kind of seeing both sides of that. I think, Tom, you probably agree. We've learned a lot the last couple of years buying these sites and thinking like a developer does or like a buyer does about what we want to buy and why and what's important to us. And then also being in the seller's chair, actually with some of our developer clients and selling to them, just the way, being in those different chairs and actually having a need to be successful in those chairs has really taught us a lot. And I think it's given us a well-rounded viewpoint on this business.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I think it's all kind of hypothetical until you've had to make those decisions on real live examples like we have. So I think that's a great point. And I think that's one of the things we'll talk a lot about in the podcast will be how can we make buyers and sellers successful? And like you said, being able to talk from the perspective of we've been there. We've been there as a broker, but we've also been there as a seller where maybe you have 5 really good options on the table. How do you distinguish between that? Or maybe you think you do, and how we can help you look at, some nuances to why maybe you really have one good option on the table. And our experience can help with that. So I think there'll be a lot of that. I think talking about Texas land, like we said, it's such an exciting time we're in. And I think such an exciting just geography that we get to work in. And then these interviews that we'll be doing from time to time with including David and Tripp, and also including, other industry experts, clients, good friends, just people that we have a lot of respect for that we want our audience to get to know.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be good.
Yeah, I think that we'll get the rest of our backdrops put together here. We'll get kind of the polish on everything. And like I said, I don't know if this will be our first launch episode, but I think this will be a fun episode to look back on. I think we've both been told that our 10th episode is going to be better than our first, and 20th better than 10th, and all of that. So looking forward to being able to look back on this. And I'm excited, Tim, doing this together with you. This is going to be a lot of fun. I think the amount of work and effort and thought that's already gone into it, that we know will go into it, pretty fun to get to do it with you. So excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get to do it with you, and especially to get to include David and Tripp, as we get further into it. And, I think to your point, I mean, we know that this is a learning process for us, and we want to be authentic about that. We've had to learn through brokerage, through being a buyer of land, through being a seller of land. You make mistakes, you learn from those mistakes, and you try and continue to get better. And so I think the audience will get to see us as we develop and kind of work through things and talk through things. I want to have an open relationship and be authentic, with the obstacles and struggles we have. I mean, this is it's a lot to take on when you're already running these other businesses, to actually try and offer something to an audience and do it on a regular basis. But we think that there's value there, and we're excited about it. And so looking forward to it.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. If you have questions about land you own in Texas, send us an email at texaslandguys@dmre.com and follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated.